everybody, welcome back to my channel. Can you believe it? We're on 16 already for my art journal book. I bought some oranges yesterday, and I've got that webbing. I've got a few pieces of tissue print that I'm contemplating. I've got my paints. Here's that piece that I keep finding in my stash, and I thought it really looks cool. I like it, but I don't know if I'll use it today or not because, as you know, I never know from moment to moment how my spread is going to turn out and evolve. But I do know I want to do more masking because last week I did masking and I did that mark making up there that was revealed, and this is one of my favorite spreads. So I want to reinforce the concept of masking. I'm looking back through my art journal, which I love. Look at all these amazing colorful pages. And I thought, what color do I want now? I would like to introduce a little bit of blue today. I don't know how much of it I'm going to keep. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I do find, and you'll see the majority of my spreads have yellow, orange, pink, and red, and those gold colors because they work so well together, all those colors. I find when I introduce blue, it can be a little bit more jarring, but we'll see how it goes. I do love the blue. So I'm going to start off with my mark making. I've got a very fine line pencil, pressing very softly. This is not to reveal anything of importance. It's just getting into my zone. I want to do blue and green marks at the top part of the spread because I'm going to start with my blue up there, and I don't know if these will show up or not, but that's the area I'll do blue. In the bottom I'm going to do yellows and oranges, and we'll see what happens. Again, I'm just getting into my zone. It's a lot of mark making, more than I sometimes do, but that's because I know I'm going to do a lot of areas with masking, and I'm going to do a lot of areas with modeling paste, and a lot of this won't be revealed later on. You might think that's a waste, but it's my method, and it's my way of having happy little surprises being revealed much later on in the spread, if they do indeed happen. I'm going to water down my blue because I'm not protecting my page first. So anything that does get put down is going to get absorbed immediately into this fresh paper. So if I water down the blue first, it won't be too dark and it won't create too dark of a color at the beginning. I like to start my spreads with lighter colors and then work my way to bolder colors later on. So I'm just getting the depth of blue that I want, keeping it watery. I don't mind that. I'm using a spare piece of paper there to test it. And now let's get some color down. Again, I did not protect these pages. I'm spraying with some water, so it's going to get very wet because I've already got wet blue, but this keeps it nice and soft and delicate. And I'm using my delicate brush as well to delicately move it around the page. And the more I spread, the more it encourages that. It's almost like glazing right now. It's not a real solid blue. And I like that. I'm using a little bit of a splashing technique, and at the very far right where the spray bottle did not hit the page, you can see those splash marks are quite bold, whereas in the middle of that right spread, they blend into the page more. So that's just the effect of water carrying the paint around. Again, who knows how much of this will remain? This is just a start. This is my very first underpainting I'm creating, and it's just giving me a start. It's very intimidating, I find, even as a seasoned artist now, to get a blank page and start. It's very daunting and intimidating, especially for beginners. I want you to know that this technique takes away all that fear. It gives you something to start, and if you know in your mind it's just an underpainting, then there is no fear. This is an art journal. This is for fun and play and exploration. By the way, I didn't realize I hadn't recorded this one little bit, so I apologize. I put some Indian yellow down with a lot of water, and then I added magenta in a few areas and let it flow and spread. So I do apologize. I have learned now to videotape in short segments so that if I ever do this mistake again, it's only a small part of the spread that you miss. I love showing you a close-up of what happened there. That's just stunning. It may not last, but it's stunning to see right now. I'm using the weight of a tub of paint to keep the page flat so that these magenta areas can flow and spread. This is so much fun. At the very bottom left there where that magenta there is flowing, it's a little too heavy of a color. The value's too strong. So I'm using a little bit of paper towel to let it flow into it, and it sponges it up. I'll add more magenta later, but I want to keep these first layers more delicate looking until I know where I'm going. You can see a lot of the mark making below there, but it's going to get covered. I love what's happening there. That's still very wet, so I thought, let's see where that flows, and I encourage it by tilting the book. Now it's bone dry. You can see that it flowed and then it disappeared completely, making a very pale background, and that's okay. While it's a really pale background, I want to mimic what I did here. I want to have pale colors below. I want to do some rubber masking, and then these pale colors will be preserved. Later on, when I pull that masking tape back, those colors will still be there, and I will have darker colors above. So I'm using a silicone brush. I've told you before, if you use a real paintbrush, it will destroy the bristles of the brush. So use either a toothpick, something pointy that's not a paintbrush, to spread this around. Little sticks, and anything that's not a bristle brush will work for spreading this around. I've sped this up so you don't get bored. You get the idea. What I'm trying to do is an overall pattern, and I'm kind of making it like raindrops. Some of them end up more round, but that's okay. This is just to give an overall pattern in the top left of the spread. Some of that may be exposed later, some of it may be buried, but it gives us a start. And because I don't want symmetry and quadrants, I want to carry this over across the center of the book and continue over to the right a little bit, just so that I don't have perfect quadrants in this spread. Some of these areas I'm going over capture and preserve some of the pencil lines, like right in the next spot, there's pencil lines, and wherever I put this masking fluid, it will preserve that right there. That's the hope. Again, a lot of that might get painted over and covered, but if you don't take the risk of putting something down in the first place, how could you possibly have anything later on to be revealed with those happy surprises? So it may seem like a waste, but it's a technique I'm showing you, number one, and number two, I'm showing you that you can get some happy surprises later on that you wouldn't get unless you did this method. So I want to do masking fluid along the bottom right as well, but not in the form of raindrops. This time I'm going to do wonky, wobbly lines. Wobbly because it's just more intuitive, more organic, more fun, and funky. I'm kind of a funky person, so I don't like perfection. I think there's a few things on there that are just fragments of the netting, and I'll take those off later on. It might bother you right now because they're sitting on the page, but those will get swished away later on. Right now I'm going over top of the pencil crayon there, and that's wonderful because this masking fluid will preserve that particular area that's getting masked over, and that pencil line will always show up. I'm pressing a little harder now while it's wet to spread it out a little, make these wobbly lines a little bit wider, because I really want to have the fun of the reveal below, and the wider the line, the more that obvious that will be. And I want to put a fifth one there because I do odd numbers. I don't like even numbers in artwork. I like balance on a spread, but not symmetry. So I like the balance that top left is raindrops, bottom right is these lines. It balances the page, but they're not symmetrical. And in doing these overlaps over the center, it draws the eye away from the fact that there is a center seam along the book. Now I want to experiment with this orange bag webbing, and I'm going to do modeling paste down, and then I'm going to put that over top and press it and see if I can get crevices. You've seen me use modeling paste before with stencils, and that's great because then wherever the pattern of the stencil is, it creates lines and crevices for paint to flow in and around. And I was hoping I can get a lot of the impression of the webbing with the modeling paste and do a similar technique. But in the last few spreads when I use the modeling paste, this is semi-transparent. I find that it dries quite gray in areas. So my idea was to put it in a tub and add some white paint to it so it keeps it a little brighter when it's dry. That's what I'm doing here, putting the modeling paste in a tub and then some white paint so that hopefully it keeps it drier. Now I wish I would have just left it at that, but I added all this extra white paint, and later on we'll find out that that was a bad idea. But that's okay, I don't mind showing you my boo-boos. It's the first time I'm using the webbing from an orange bag as well, and I have no idea how it's going to react, but that's what journals are for. It's to experiment. This is not a competition. It's not an art workshop that it's not a gallery show that I'm doing a piece of art that has to be perfect. I'm experimenting right now. I haven't done this before. So I'm spreading it around wherever I want to do an impression from the bag. Doing it a little bit thick, but not too thick. And I'm trying to stay away from my masking fluid because it's too thick and it would fight with the masking fluid technique. So I'm trying to just avoid those areas if I can. I'm not trying to be too perfect. I'm just trying to spread it in the general area of where I want the impression from the webbing. So let's put some down. I'm stretching it out, making it a little wonky. That's a lot of fun, and I think it would have worked if I would have left it where it sits, and I think if I would have let it dry a little longer before I pulled it back, it would have worked. But my problem was, as I found out now from experience, because again, I've never done this before, I added too much white paint. It changed the properties of the masking tape. It changed the properties of the molding paste. And I thought I would help it along by rolling it down. And again, even this would have worked if I would have just let it sit a few minutes, but I didn't. You will see that I pulled it off too fast. I should have left it. And I thought that wasn't working, so let's try something different. So I thought, let's take the spreader and flatten it out a little bit. And even there, if I would have left it dry, it might have worked. But I pulled it back too soon, and it's very wet. It's almost like wet paint instead of wet modeling paste. And that's okay. I don't mind sharing this boo-boo with you. I'm teaching you lessons. That's what this is for. It's to experiment, learn, and grow. I try things, experiment, play, and let you learn through my mistake. I'm getting a little bit of it, smudging it there, but I'm trying not to get too much over top of that masking fluid, because then it would be hard to find it later and pull it back. So I'm just trying to be very delicate where I put it there and not interfere with the masking fluid. As far as the rest of it goes, I do not have an impression of the webbing like I wanted. Nothing like it. It's nothing like what I planned, and that's okay. What can I do about it? So I'm going to take this bigger paint spreader, and I'm trying to just smudge away from the center fold of the book, take away the bulk of that modeling paste. And while it's wet, I'm just dabbing it around to flatten the surface. I can still do something with this because one of my other techniques is I do heavy white paint over top of colors, and then I scrape and reveal colors below with a toothpick so that the lines that I make with the toothpick become the colors that were below. So yeah, the webbing didn't work out, but I'm showing you another technique here of what you can do to recapture something of value. Twofold. That it shows the pattern of squiggly lines with interchanging colors in beneath, but it's also an area where I can put wet paint over top now and it will fill in all those lines and scribbles. So let's do something about that. Now that this is dry, let's see where we can take this. I'm leaving the masking fluid in place because the whole point is to now add stronger colors over top. And I'm going to do the area from bottom left to top right where I added the white and then all those scribbles. I'm going to put my favorite Nicolazo gold paint down, and I'm going to use a soft brush and just smush it into place. And you can see already how the paint is going into those scratches, and that's fun. And the idea is to put down heavy paint, wipe away, and keep trying that process until I've got the right amount of color in those scribbles. I'm just moving it around, and again, there's a lot of matte medium across the surface of this spread, so this paint isn't going to dry right away. So as I see where it's soaking in, don't worry, I plan on wiping back, but those areas there are fun, and I'm just encouraging it by smooshing it. I'm sort of pressing a little harder with the brush in those areas so it smooshes it down into the crevice. My first wipe, I'm going to spray the paper towel and wipe. So the idea is to wipe away the paint. You might think that's wasteful, but this is the only way you can get paint down into the surface and then remove it on the top layer. So I tried the first wipe with a damp paper towel. Now I'm wiping off the brush and putting more paint right from the tub. Without it being too watery, to see if that will make a stronger impression inside those scratches. Second wipe is with the dry paper towel, and what that does is it's wiping off the top surface, but it's not removing all of it because it's not wet. So what I want to do is purposely let there be a little bit of yellow and gold around the page, as well as gold in the scratches. And now, because I wiped more than I want to reveal more in the scratches. So it's just a matter of doing layer after layer, wiping back, and deciding how I want to fit, like where I want to stop. It seems wasteful, but this is just these abstract techniques, it's all about layers. This is still a third wipe with a dry paper towel. Now, if I wanted to wipe away even more between the scratches in there, I like that's really highlighted those scratchy areas there and in the top right. But these areas I'm pointing out now in between the scribbles, I could actually have used a wet toothpick and scraped away all that gold paint if I didn't want it there, if I only wanted to reveal the scratchy colors. But I wanted to preserve some yellow in the background, so that's why I did what I did. But you have that choice. I wanted to add yellow, but I wanted to highlight the scribbles and have both. Now I've got some of that same transparent blue, but instead of watering it down, I had a fine liner tube with it mixed with white paint, and it's a softer, brighter blue, and it's a little more opaque. So I just thought I'd put that down. I don't mind that it's turning green in the areas where it touches the yellow, because green and blue and yellow make green, of course. And I'm using a small brush to get it in the crease there, but it didn't quite work, but that's okay. I can change that later if I like. So I'm just playing around with adding a little more blue in the bottom right of the spread, just for now to see, and a little bit up there. And I'm going to use my finger to dab it around. And again, I'm going over top of the area where the raindrops are because I want to obviously start building more color on top of where all the masking fluid is, so that those pale raindrops later become more apparent. And I'm using some spray to gently move this water. The water will actually move the paint around in a very delicate and organic way, rather than me using paint strokes. Keep in mind, people, this is just a there are several mid layers that we have to go through before we get the final outcome. And again, you have to do these awkward layers in between, because as I reveal later, I'll reveal over and over and over, more of these little layers get revealed. And it's the only way to make this work. If I was to just do this in one sitting and paint everything down as you see it, first of all, I wouldn't even think of it, because it's all a matter of putting down and wiping back and revealing. And it's really hard to mimic that by painting that look. So it's just a bunch of layers and trusting that it will turn into something in the end. These masking areas, it's getting a little bit heavy with paint and paint over top, so I've got to be mindful that I don't do too much of that. I want to still be able to find where to pull back that masking fluid. Now I'm going to add a little magenta. Magenta is going to be my accent color. And an accent color, which is what gives pop in my work, I quite often just have it in a few areas, and it's quite an obvious pop of color compared to the rest of the colors. But those areas may change. Again, this is just the beginning of layers. Who knows? While it's still wet, I thought I would dab some of that back. And again, I don't want to, like, this magenta that I put down is really strong shot of color everywhere, which means I need to strengthen the value of the other colors eventually to match. Right now, I haven't determined that the contrast here is going to stay as it is. I'm just moving it around and seeing what develops. When you watch my journals entries, you see that the layers change and morph all the time. I thought I'd put a little magenta to let it soak into those scratches, and I like that. I can always wipe away that surface area once that settles if I don't like all that magenta the way I just put it down. So I'm mindful of the balance of the magenta across the spread, but again, don't fall in love with this because some of this could change drastically. But as I work through every section, I try to keep some balance. Even though it'll change later on, the balance will change later on as well. It's very wet on the top there. I'm trying to encourage the paint to move around but not have obvious starts and ends of it. I like it to be a cloudy, kind of fuzzy, floaty kind of look to it as it dries. I'm going to put some paper down and just barely dab it. I just want to lift some of that magenta without changing the effect of that cloudy melting of color. I want to put a little bit of blue down, very watery, but the brush was dirty. So when I put it down, it was quite a dirty blue. I don't like that. So I'm going to dab that back and try again. This time I've got the brush cleaned in clean water, wiped off and cleaned, and I'll dab it from the container right onto the page because there's still a lot of water on the brush, and the page is still wet. It didn't improve that much, but it's a little bit cleaner. You got to be careful when you mix colors while they're all still wet, because when they overlap each other, they become dirty. But it's okay. There's matte medium all over this spread. If I don't like what I've just done, I can wipe it off. Or use, as you can see, the spray bottle helps to disperse paint, and then you could dab away if you don't like. At this point, I'm just in my zone. I have no idea of where this is headed. I'm just coaxing it along. With one stage after another, I decide, okay, this is what I've got. What can I do with it? I thought it might be fun to spray it, to squiggle a little bit of blue in the bottom right there. We'll see what happens. You can see it's getting all feathery as it's dispersing into the paper or onto the ground. And I thought, I'm going to add 3 circles up there. And I know that they're going to get all fuzzy because the whole background is wet and it's dispersing. And that's okay. I didn't want clean, sharp lines. I wanted feathery circles. But I noticed while I'm working that that blue is spreading out a little more than I wanted, and it's taking away the look of the circles. So I'm going to sponge some of that away, especially in the center of the circles, and kind of improve that a little bit. I wanted the circles to be obvious but fuzzy. So I'm reapplying, and we'll see what happens. I like the idea that it's like clouds of smoke, like from somebody blowing cigarette smoke circles. I wanted that effect. And I'm just tipping the page to allow some of that magenta to spread. So I've softened the look of the magenta quite a bit. It's dissolving and softening. But there's a lot of play across this spread, a lot of play. But I like to do a lot of playful, busy background underpaintings, because then you can decide later how you want to tone that back a bit. I also, as I work on a spread, try to ignore that middle crease of the book. I'm just showing you that the paint and the modeling paste with all that water is reacting and making it's trying to alter the properties of the paint there. But if you let that dry, you end up, like if you were to scrape that away now, it would scrape away from the page. But if you let it dry, you have some interesting stucco texture. So I'm going to let it dry. But I don't want to overwork it too much because it's still wet there, and I don't want to scrape it away. It's a delicate balance between touching it up a little more and disturbing the paper surface, or the surface of the paste on the surface of the paper. I decided again, because I've got masked raindrops, I need to add more layers of blue over there so that when I reveal the raindrop areas, there's a contrast. It looks like a darker page, but that's because I put the camera closer to the book, and it blocked out a little bit more of that light, so it seems like deeper colors. These are the true colors in the book. When I had the camera higher up and it allowed more brightness on the page, that made everything look a little lighter, but these are the colors that I'm working with. So I'm scraping away, first of all, the top surface of paint, and then I'm trying to find the tip of the masking fluid and pulling it back with my finger. It's very much like rubber. It's fun. So you just keep pulling that off. And you can see now that it did indeed reveal the true colors it masked below. They seem paler than I thought they were before because I've added so much strong color over top. But that's the effect I wanted. This is exactly what I wanted to do. That's fun. I really like that. I've got a piece of sandpaper cut, just a nice small piece, and I'm just lightly, it looks like I'm pressing hard, but I'm pressing hard on the book to hold it down, but I'm giving it a light sanding because there's texture now on the page, and as I sandpaper over it, it reveals the surface of the stucco texture. Now I'm going to pull apart all the masking fluid that's dry from the raindrops, and I will speed this up because there are a lot of raindrops. And you can't do this until the spread is dry, by the way. If you do that, as you can imagine, it would smudge the paint. So I'm just working around the entire spread to find all the raindrop bits and pull away the masking fluid. Again, it dries and it looks like it's quite white there, but there was pale color, if you recall, on that page. So it's not exactly a strong white. It's a subtle, it's sort of a tinted white. I like that. It may or may not stay, but it gives me areas now, even if I glaze over top of these white raindrops, they are still going to show up. So we'll see what happens. Again, this is just the mid layer. This is not anywhere near the finish. Isn't that fun? It's a good technique. It's very common in watercolor. Not so common, I guess, in mixed media because you've got to watch the thickness of your paint, but I thought I'd give it a go and it worked. This is still a bit of a mess. Remember, it's just an underpainting. But at this stage, if you don't do this, you don't know where you're going in the further along. So as I do each layer, it gives me new ideas. They're all organic. They're all intuitive. I just go with the flow. So it looks like I'm pressing hard, but I'm not. I just sped that up. I'm giving a light sanding. I wouldn't use a heavy, coarse sandpaper because you could scrape too much away. And all of the areas now that are the top surface of the paint that's getting revealed now, the stucco surface, if you will, all of that's allowing white areas where I can do a glaze. I could either leave it white or put a glaze there, and it will show up as a brighter glaze in all the areas that have sanded off. If this was a canvas or a cradled board, cradled canvas, you could really do a lot of layers of this and scraping and sanding. But because this is a paper book, the only reason why I can get away with this is that there was matte medium as a coating over the surface before. But anyway, you got to be careful. It's a fine line. As I'm sanding away the center, I'm trying to reveal the shape of that first circle, but it's also happily revealing more. It's revealing there the raindrops plus some other areas of white that are there, the bumps. And I quite like that. I wouldn't have thought of painting that, but if you sand away, those things get revealed. So now you know why you do those layers, and it seems wasteful, but you never know what you're going to reveal until you do layers. I found some more areas there that had the masking fluid, and I'm just scraping those back. Again, you couldn't think of painting all those white scratches. They're just there. They're revealed. And now I have to make a decision. What am I going to do with it? I'm going to take it further. I'm going to do more scraping because in this bottom right, I felt like I needed more texture and more pattern. So the more I scrape, the more it scrapes on the layer of that stucco and gives me a pattern. And then it gives me ideas of what I want to do from here. I like both pages. I like that my new page has different colors. I do like that the bottom spread there had that happy bright orange, and I'm going to apply more of that because that will pick up in the white areas that are scraped and hopefully add more brightness. But before I do that, I want to do a glaze of a white glaze. Normally I do 2/3 matte medium and 1/3 paint. This time I did more like a quarter of the ratio of paint because I wanted to keep it very subtle. And I thought I'll do it subtle as a glaze, and it's glazing, but it's also giving another coating over the surface of the paper. It does dry clearer than it goes on. But I thought if I wanted a little bit heavier in paint in some areas, I can dab a little paint and smush that around as I decide where I want that to be. But right now it's a consistent semi-transparent glaze of white. Again, it will dry more clear. I'm coating the page, I'm preserving what's here, and it gives me a fresh start to do more glazes over top while protecting and preserving what I have. And the more layers of matte medium you put over the spread, the more strength you add to the paper. And as I do this, it gives me ideas. I start thinking what pops to my head of what's needed. And usually by the time I've finished this, I've already got a new idea. You can see by doing this, it also turns the spread into a very pastel effect, and you can keep that if you want. But this whole journal book of mine is quite bold with colors, so I'll probably end up deepening the colors quite a bit. But this is the point where you could make that choice. It's your call. You might have an art journal book if you do all the same things as me. You might have one that's got a different range of colors or more pastels. That's totally up to you. I'm showing you techniques. I want to add a little more white there while it's still wet. So this is where the semi-transparent white glaze becomes a little bit more white because I purposely added more white over top of that blue. I just felt that that big patch of blue was a bit too heavy of blue. I'd rather have the blue subtle in the areas around the page. So I'm going to tone it back a little bit more there as well. I'm going to add more white up here because I've got an idea. And I'll use my finger to smudge it around to keep it organic. I don't want paint strokes. And I want a heavier coat of white because I've got a big idea. You've seen me do it. I'm going to bring it out again. I did it earlier before I used the toothpick to scrape and make dark, scratchy lines. Now I want to put paint over top and then scrape into it and reveal the color that's below. So obviously I've decided the theme of this spread is scraping in swooshy, scribbly, loop-de-loo lines all over. That's kind of the common theme. So let's go. And you have to do this while the white paint is still damp. But you can see now it reveals the colors below and it undulates between blue and pink as it moves around the page, and I like that. And up here I'm doing dash lines and I'm revealing the magenta. This is so much fun, and it also gives texture so that later on if I put wet fluid paint in there, it will go right into those crevices. I like that they're not perfect. That's fun. That's really wonky and fun. I like the energy that we're getting here. It's starting to tell me what it wants to be. And this is what always happens about midway to 2/3. It starts to tell me what it wants. And because I did those little tiny dash lines, I thought I'd do tiny, tiny squiggle lines to balance. And that's fun. It breaks it up and makes a little more interest around the page. I'm going to let that dry. And now that it's bone dry, I'm going to sand a little bit more. Yeah, I like where this is going. I like that those big areas there are white. Then I've got the two areas here that are big loop-de-loo scribbles. Then I've got two areas where it's small little scratches. I like the variety. And then I've got these three circles up there and that triangle down below for my accents of blue, even though that won't be my final accent. They're just top layer. Again, at this point, I'm making layers. I want to make a bit of a glaze of the Nicolazo gold. The reason why I'm putting matte medium in with it is I want it to spread, to use it to spread around and not get so absorbed inside, but to spread and sit on the top and become a stronger paint. Again, this seems like a very bold move. You have to make bold moves so that you can wipe some of it back and reveal bold little shapes underneath. A lot of my abstracts that I put on my wall or sell or show in put in a gallery, a lot of my abstracts are easily 10 layers. And that's what makes it so interesting at the end, that you get the layers and layers of interesting detail that get revealed. So I'm still maintaining those three smoke circles. I'm calling them smoke circles. But they're fuzzy and they're different than the rest of the page. I like the juxtaposition of smoky and fuzzy versus strong, scratchy lines. And now while it's wet, I'm coaxing it with my finger and I'm allowing that wet paint to travel down the page. And where I don't want it, I'm dabbing back with tissue. So things are starting to come together. At this point, what I'm looking for is continuity and flow, layers, but I need them to make sense. And I like the idea of one area morphing and moving around the page and morphing and changing into something of balance on the other end, but different. Now I've decided I want to do something. I want to add some of that Nicolazo gold glaze over top of these wonky stripes. And what it's doing is bringing the eye from the middle of the page right there, and it looks like dribble marks down the page from them. That's the effect. And it's still semi-transparent, so it's more like a glaze than painting a strong orange. I used a finer brush to do that, by the way. Now I've decided I want to add a little magenta. I didn't want all 5 of those to be the same. And I'm using heavier magenta in the bottom, and then I want to dry my brush off and then coax that towards the top so that it looks like it's fading. It, unfortunately, right in the middle there, right there, it bled into the crevices of that stucco. So I had to make an effort of wiping that back with a tissue. And I'm going to do the same thing with my dash lines. I'm purposely doing a darker glaze of magenta in there, but I will disperse that with a spray of water so that some of the magenta stays within the crevices and some of it bleeds over the surface. That's so much fun. I love that technique. So here we go. Look how fun that is. I'm really, really crazy about that. This is starting to take shape. It's starting to talk to me. Because I've decided at this point for sure the magenta is my strong accent, and I like my accent to be in 3 locations, I'm just enhancing it there, there, and there, so that at the top left, so it balances with the other 2 areas. And this, what the trick in this is it balances and it allows the eye to move around the page. Because usually with your accent, that's going to be the first thing that your eye travels to. But I like the eye to travel around. Now, in the last spread, I used this textured paper. I'm going to use it again in this one spot because it just made so much sense to me. I felt like the loop-de-loos in this one area really matched the loop-de-loo scribbles where I used the toothpick. And I'm looking for the side of it that has the threads on the top and making them sit on the top surface. I'm going to glue that down with matte medium, quite a bit of it because this is a heavy paper. I think this is really fun. I think it's a perfect accent, and I'm not even going to glaze a lot of it because I like the color, how it kind of marries all the colors together, blends them together. I don't have to do much to this. And I'm using the paint spreader, the flat one, to get it into the crevice of the book, the inner crevice. And anywhere where there's still necessary, a need to put glue over top of the fibers, that's what I'm doing. And now that it's bone dry, I thought I'd pick up the top surface of it with magenta, but the pastel I have was too dark, so I have to do a test on a paper. And if I put the pastel down and then white over it, gave me the right color of magenta. So I knew it was worth trying on the actual page. Now this, I'm pressing ever so lightly. I'm only picking up the top surface of those fibers. And then I'm doing my coat of white. I really think that worked. I love that. It's doing something similar to the blue area, but with different techniques. I like that. The story's there, but it's morphing and playfully moving around the page. It's changing it. All that squiggly stuff is changing different ways around the page. I think that's very playful. I'm trying to make a smudgy look on the bottom right to match the top left smudgy look of the top left spread. And then the final thing that I want to do is go over the top surface of the stucco, if you will, with white pastel to match some of the other pastel areas. It almost looks like taking icing sugar and dusting it around the page. That's the effect I want. And so I'm bringing out those 3 circles with a white pastel as well to give that chalky look. The chalky look is the final top layer of this spread, and I'm trying to move it around wherever it makes sense. And that jumps to the foreground and pushes the rest into the background. I really like that those circles look chalky. Another thing I want to do is the same technique, but instead of white, I want to use this very bright, cheerful orange over top of the Nicolazzo gold because I find some of those areas a little too dirty looking. So I'm rubbing it quite hard, and it's rubbing onto the top surface of the page, but not disturbing the dark scribble colors in the bottom layer of those squiggles there. Isn't that fun? So it's really enhancing the scribbles and bringing out a happy bright orange so that the page doesn't look so dirty. Because the magenta is bright and cheerful, I want the orange to be bright and cheerful. I really think that works. Look at the top surface is the bright, and the bottom surface is the lower recesses of the scribbles. That's fun. I'm liking this a lot. You know, we're just coming out of our cold snap, and spring's not too far away, and I feel like these are happy spring colors. It's like spring is begging to come. I decided that I didn't like how choppy that looked, that the center line is very clear definition between the left page and the right. I didn't want that, so I want to blend with white pastel. But because I put orange pastel down first, this is turning into a creamy yellow instead of staying white. But I don't mind that. I don't mind it at all, because there is still bright yellow around the page in certain areas. And I'm continuing the eye to move around the page by adding that chalky look in other areas, so the eye moves all around the spread. I don't like the eye to find a spot and then get stuck there. I like it to keep moving. It's playful. And I like to give my viewers a journey. It's a journey around the page. I mean, it's kind of telling me a story here, but it's more a journey than a story. And that's what I like for my viewers to have. I don't want obvious stories that I have. I want my viewer, and each time I look at this book later on, because I do it when I'm in a contemplative mood, each time I look at it, I'll take a different journey. So I really like what that did. I'm very, very happy with this now. I'm done. And I just think that there's a lot of balance. Oh, I wasn't done. I decided there wasn't quite enough balance of that white chalky look. And I think you'll agree, just a very light surface of it up there. That's all it needed. It just bothered me until I did that. And now I know it is indeed done. The left white areas balance with the white right areas. I think the whole thing has balance now. It's got energy and movement, very playful. It's cheery. I've done a lot of techniques here for you, and I hope you've learned from it, and I hope you use these in any of your masterpieces. And yeah, a lot of things have come together at this point. We've done a lot of techniques in the book, and this is just, I just love it. I present to you number 16, completely finished. I'm happy with it, and I hope you are too. Thank you for joining me, and have a great day. See you next time.